Welcome to the New Wealth Wave podcast hosted by Dr. Joaquin Wallace. We're diving deep into the intricate layers of the 7-stage generational wealth model to offer invaluable insights on legacy building, wealth accumulation and preservation, and financial growth across generations. I'm Dr. Joaquin Wallace, and this is the New Wealth Wave podcast.
Hey, future wealth builders, this is Dr. Joaquin Wallace, and I want to thank you for subscribing and tuning in to the New Wealth Wave podcast. I'll tell you what, this first quarter has been amazing. We've had some great guests, great content as well, and guess what? I'm going to share with you some of the best takes from the first quarter.
So, welcome, Mr. Martin C. Johnson, Esquire, estate planning attorney. Thank you for joining this afternoon.
Thank you very much for having me, Doctor. It's a pleasure to be here.
Why is estate planning important to do so as early as possible?
Well, the number one reason is that we never know when our last day on earth is going to be. And so the sooner you prepare for it, the better. Many people believe that it's something that only older people do. But what if you're in an accident and you die? What if you're in an accident and you become incapacitated and you can't do planning in those kind of situations? So that's why you should do it as early as possible. And based on your current financial situation, there is an estate plan that's meant for every level of wealth, so to speak.
I want to go back to the planning for your demise. As you mentioned, that's one of the conversations that we don't like to talk about. But one thing that I always mention to my clients, there's less than a 1% chance you're going to pass away today, but it's a 100% chance that it's going to happen. It's a 20% chance that you're going to be, right? It's a 20% chance that you're going to become disabled. And you mentioned the incapacitated piece of it all. What is the biggest hurdle you find in estate planning and getting clients to invest in an estate plan?
The biggest hurdles, there's a couple of hurdles. One hurdle is people are overwhelmed with just dealing with the eventuality of their own demise. A lot of people don't want to talk about death and don't even want to deal with it. They're too involved in the being present and dealing with the issues of today. For those people who are kind of thinking about estate planning, some of them are being held back because of just lack of knowledge and fear. They have heard things, maybe it's expensive, it takes a lot of time. And then I would say the number one hurdle is people believe that estate planning is only for rich people or very wealthy people. And there's nothing further from the truth.
For those who want to move forward with estate planning, what are their options?
That's a good question as well, because there are, as I see it, 3 primary options. And if I would start at the most basic option, is a person could try to create an estate plan on their own. We've already discussed the components of a comprehensive plan. And in most states, individuals can create their own estate plan by using maybe some online tools or getting some books, some template documents, that sort of thing. I don't recommend that because there is that whole issue of you don't know what you don't know. And many of these DIY plans are lacking so many essential components, and then they end up not being effective.
I am so excited about our guest this afternoon. Dr. Marcia Ruben is the founder and president of Ruben Consulting Group and has worked as an executive coach. Marcia was awarded a 2-year research professorship to focus on the intersection of neuroscience, leadership, and complexity. Dr. Ruben, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dr. Wallace. Great to be here.
What does neuroscience tell us about reprogramming your financial genetic code?
The idea of neuroplasticity. And that was discovered in the 1940s, which actually is almost 80 years ago. Donald Hebb discovered that our brains are plastic, that our brains can change. That's really critical. So for all of your listeners, if you think that you're not going to be able to do this, that's not true. Now, it takes focus and attention to change your brain. So if you think, and I heard this, somebody explained it this way. So imagine that you usually take a freeway to get somewhere, and that just, you do that on automatic pilot. And then if you start driving on a different road, a different route, you're going to have to think about every turn, and you're going to have to keep doing that and doing it the first few times. And after a while, it's going to be like driving on the highway. It'll just be automatic. So the idea is you start developing new habits. And there's a saying that neurons that wire together fire together. And so that's quite important. So bottom line here is neuroscience teaches us that we can create new habits, have 5 times as many circuits that monitor threats than monitor rewards. And we pick up threats in 1/5 of 1 second. I mean, that's literally a nanosecond. And we have 2 modes of operating, both non-conscious and then conscious. And most of the time we're on autopilot. And I think all of you listeners can probably think about a time that you got in your car and you drove somewhere and got there and you didn't remember the route you took or how you got there or anything about it. So that's kind of where our brain is designed to quickly develop habits so that we can function. So our amygdala, well, first of all, our prefrontal cortex, this is the area that's where we make decisions, logic, and analysis. And that part of our brain takes a lot of energy. We have what's called a threat center that's kind of behind our ears here. And that's the amygdala. That is, I call it our threat center. That's what picks up threats in 1/5 of a second. And when we pick up a threat, our thinking slows down so we can assess, am I safe or not? And the hippocampus is where memories are embedded, and mostly negative memories more than positive, because we're really wired more to pick up threats than we are rewards. We are biological beings. We're mostly run by emotions, not logic. That most people think it's logic, and it's not. And our school systems teach more logical, analytical thinking, but really we're emotional beings. So understanding that is really important. And it's all about being aware of ourselves and really honing ourselves so we can be our very best self. Being aware of your self-talk, being aware of your positivity versus negativity bias, and remembering to breathe. There are lots of, and this is something we can talk about more, but just finding ways to fine-tune your own body and your own nervous system so that you can be as productive and bring your best self forth to whatever you do.
Accompanying me to discuss this critical stage is Jasper Smith. Jasper's known as MrBuildWealth, hashtag is silent, has been involved in the financial services space for over 15 years. He's the chief visionary behind a financial education company called the hashtag silent Build Wealth movement. He works tirelessly to disrupt generational poverty for everyone so their kids can live a life of privilege.
Here's my book. It actually took me maybe 2 months to actually write the book because it was all in my head. It was a matter of me just getting it on paper and getting it done. And so that book has become a big piece of my gift also to the world of, if you ever pick this book up 100 years from now, those questions are still relevant. So it's timeless, it's evergreen. And that's what I've learned, that a lot of the content that I love to produce, it's not flashy, it's not I'm here today, gone tomorrow. It's just things that if we can get these things down, it's kind of like your model. If we just go through the model, we're gonna be okay. If you go through the book, you're gonna be okay. At some point, it was one of those on my to-do list or my bucket list, and I got it done fairly early in my life. And I have some other books that I also would love to publish, but it just meant the world to me that I did it. And I can say forever in life.
You do a lot of work in the community. What drives you to take on that passion to transfer that knowledge in the community itself?
Because if I don't do it, who's going to do it? That's the real answer. I look at a lot of the issues we have in the world and in the country and in my neighborhood and in my city. And I'm always like, what can I do? I can't take on all the issues that plague my community. So I choose the financial literacy one. There's so many people who've told me, well, pick your financial institution, throw out a name, right? They don't ever come here. We don't hear from them. We don't see them. They're not in my community. I have to go here to go get service. And you just keep hearing that over and over. And it's like, what could I do to help those people who feel excluded, who don't have the information, who feel financially illiterate? I got the info. If I don't do it, who's going to go do it? That's why I keep doing the work. And so I will sleep good every night as long as I keep doing this work, and I do it in the right way. And I got to the root cause of the issue as to why they overspend every month. Because that's all they saw. They don't know how to not spend money every month. You don't have to buy that. You don't have to pay for those gifts. There's a lot of things you don't have to do. You just don't know another way of living. So we gotta do some rewiring. But it honestly, man, those first two stages is where I found the bulk of people.
And that's why that stage 3, as practitioners, as we are, reprogramming your financial genetic code is so important, because again, you have a lot of missed meetings, a lot of excuses, analysis by paralysis. One thing that I constantly speak about is that we're taught, in terms of the external model, we're taught that rich is where we want to be. We have songs about it, get rich, die trying, right? I mean, so many songs are about us becoming rich. My theory basically is rich is transactional, wealth is a legacy. And so it's up to us to try to change that mindset in regards to reprogramming that financial genetic code, which is stage 3. That's the healing part. That's where you and I come in, and that's where other practitioners like ourselves, this is why we bring so much to the table. Our guest is Tiffany Grant, MBA, owner of Money Talk with Tiff. Tiffany is also a fellow podcaster, blogger, and most importantly, an advocate for financial literacy, targeting both community constituents and stakeholders. She is also an accredited financial counselor. Then the marginalized communities. What do you think is the contributing factor to that lack of knowledge and information?
So much. So when we're looking at marginalized communities, right? So let me give you a quick example that most people can probably follow. I'm online and I create financial education online. I have the blog, I have the podcast, I have all these things, and the information is readily out there, right? But what about people that don't have access to the internet? What about people that don't have access to a computer or a phone or anything to gather this information? And so it's easy to say, oh, well, the information's out there, but how accessible is this information? Because not everybody has the same privileges that we have, right? And so that's one example of how things don't get disseminated all the way. Another example is, if you read, like, for instance, The Color of Law, there's been so much historical policies and things that have worked against marginalized communities for so long that the trust in these systems is out the window. There's so many people that are unbanked or underbanked because they don't want to deal with the banking system. And I don't blame them, There's so much that plays into how marginalized communities kind of are in the situations that they are in right now. And it's not just, just pull yourself up by the bootstraps and, go do this and do that or whatever. There's other forces at play that also need to be addressed, and it's not just the individual.
What was your aha moment that you knew that it was imminent for you to make a change?
Yeah, so I had a few, but I think what pushed me into stage 1 was hiring a career coach. So I had just graduated from my bachelor's degree, and I was trying to figure out, what am I going to do now? And I hired a career coach. Shout out to her, because she really worked with me. I didn't have any money. And so, she worked out a plan. But one thing that she pointed out in one of our very first meetings, she made me write out my circle of 5. So she said, who are the 5 people that you talk to the most, spend the most time with? So I wrote all of them out. Then she had me write down, okay, how much do these people make? What do you think? Even if you don't know. So I wrote that out. Then she asked me, where are you trying to be financially? What's a good salary number? And at that time I said, 100,000. That's great. I would love that. And she said, okay, if everybody in your circle is not there, how are you going to get there? And that lesson has sat with me for all of these years, that the people that you surround yourself with is a direct correlation of where you're going to go in life. Now, I'm not saying that you don't get rid of your friends, because I still have the same friends, but you also have to surround yourself with people that are where you want to go or higher than where you want to go, because the conversations just sound different. They look different. I feel like that is really what propelled me into the stage 1, thinking about my external factors.
And today, to help me, we have Kelly Augspurger.
She co-founded Steadfast Insurance LLC. Kelly is an LTC insurance specialist and certified senior advisor, working nationwide to help clients and financial advisors plan for extended care. Her goal is to help clients create a plan for care to live well and reduce the physical, mental, emotional, and financial consequences of an extended care situation.
Everyone needs a plan for extended care. Everyone. If you anticipate to live beyond the age of 80, you have a very good chance of needing some kind of care. Okay. And is it reasonable? If we think that we're going to live beyond the age of 80, is it reasonable to assume that we might need some help along the way? I think it is. So what's your plan, right? Get those basics together, talk with your family, talk about your preferences, write out your plan. Again, that plan might change over time. Very well could, but who's going to provide care? Where do you want to receive care? How are you going to pay for care? There are many ways to pay for care, as we've talked about. Consider long-term care insurance. Is it a viable solution for you? Based on your health. Health is really important. And we didn't talk about this in length, but when I work with clients, what I do in the very beginning, even before presenting options, is I look at your health.
I create a long-term care plan.
So a plan for extended care, Dr. Wallace, is vitally important, not just for your finances, which I think that's what most people focus on, especially financial planners, because you all are numbers people, which is good. That's your job. But it is equally as important to come up with a plan for your family, right? We love our family. We love the people around us. Maybe you don't have immediate family or even extended family, but what about quality of care? What about your friends? If you need care, the people around you, if you expect them to care for you, their lives will change dramatically. If they have to become caregivers, their lives will be put on hold. And it's just a matter of fact. That's just how it is. It will change. And so we need to come up with a plan to best protect the quality of life, not just for ourselves if we need care, but for those around us, to protect them physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, all the things. We want to put those plans in place to best protect them. We're also protecting, our finances, protecting that portfolio. It really is portfolio protection when we have a way to pay for care. It protects our legacy too. Say you choose to self-fund and pay for care out of pocket. And let's say you have $500,000, $500,000. But what if you need care? What if you need care and it costs, let's say, $300,000? That legacy that you had planned on passing along to your family, to your kids, to your grandkids is now whittled down to $200,000. Does that meet your legacy goals? Maybe not. So coming up with a plan of who's going to provide care, who are those caregivers, who's going to coordinate care, where I want to receive care, and how I'm going to pay for that care is really important.
Today, we're going to bring back Dr. Marcia Ruben, who was on stage 2 of the Generational Wealth Model. I'll give you a brief rundown on Dr. Ruben again. Dr. Ruben, an esteemed professor at Golden Gate University, she has dedicated her career to understanding human behavior and fostering transformation through coaching and education. Her insight underlies the potential for reprogramming one's financial genetic code, a crucial step in achieving financial well-being and advancing through the generational wealth model.
Learning and development doesn't stop in our 20s. It used to be, I remember hearing, after 25, you can't learn anymore. Well, that is not true. So our brain continues to rewire itself. And we can, with conscious effort, change well-worn habits of thinking and behavior. And so what happens, here's a quick explanation of neuroplasticity. Our brain cells communicate with each other, and that's called neuronal firing. And when we communicate a lot, the connection gets stronger and stronger and faster. So think of a new habit that you develop. And after enough repetition, it becomes automatic and a habit. And hence there's a really catchy phrase, neurons that fire together, wire together. And if we don't make a conscious effort to develop new habits, neurons that don't sync don't link. So think of habits you've tried. If we didn't get those firing, we didn't create a new habit. So you have to get the neurons firing. And that happens automatically. You don't have to think about it.
Is it possible for someone to heal from financial trauma?
I believe anything is possible. The human spirit is vast. Because of neuroplasticity, we can change. A big thing, and I didn't talk about this before, is about the stories that we tell ourselves. So we tend to think in stories. And think about it. If somebody tells you it's a fragment of something, we're going to make up a beginning, a middle, and an end. That's how we think. There is some therapy that's fairly new that's called narrative therapy. So you have the power to change the story about yourself. Friends may be envious if you start to surpass them. And it may trigger what Dr. David Rock from the Neuro Leadership Institute calls a status threat. If somebody seems to be higher than us and we feel less than, that can result in an amygdala threat to our brain. It's a social threat. So the advice is, number one, is to connect internally with your reason for wanting to embark on, let's say, on the generational wealth journey. What's your why? Why is it important to you? And how's it linked to your purpose in life and to the values that you have? And it's really good to really, every once in a while, to think about what's really important to me. What are my values? And sometimes you wake up and you realize that the friends you have are not really your friends, because true friends, I've found, are supportive and want what is best for you, and they're happy for you.
Future Wealth Builders, I hope you enjoyed those shorts. But guess what? We have even more coming up in the second quarter. So make sure you're subscribed to the New Wealth Wave podcast. You can catch all the new episodes coming up. Remember, Future Wealth Builders, generational wealth begins with generational knowledge. I'll see you on the next New Wealth Wave podcast.
Thank you for joining us on the New Wealth Wave podcast, hosted by Dr. Joaquin Wallace. Our show is edited and produced by Ray Haycraft. To dive deeper into the world of financial wisdom and learn how to create your financial footprints, head to our website at www.drjwallace.com. For more updates and exclusive content, connect with us on social media by searching Dr. Joaquin Wallace. And if you have questions and comments, feel free to email us at thenewwealthwavepodcast@gmail.com. Remember, generational wealth begins with generational knowledge. And as always, thanks for listening. The content presented in this podcast is strictly for educational purposes and should not be taken as investment advice. The views and opinions expressed by our guests may not necessarily reflect those of the New Wealth Wave podcast and its host or producers. Listeners are urged to exercise discretion and judgment before making any financial or investment decisions. Always consult with a financial professional or advisor before taking any action based on the content of this podcast. If you're enjoying the New Wealth Wave podcast, we appreciate if you leave us a review. We're always open to topic suggestions and guest recommendations. Feel free to reach out to us directly with your thoughts and feedback. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on the New Wealth Wave podcast.